Live, it's the Inside Scoop, Virginia. All the news Virginians want to know. Here's your host, political insider, George Burke.
Welcome to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Tonight, our guest will be Pat Edmonson, who is one of now 4 candidates who are running for lieutenant governor. Last week we had 5. One of them dropped out. Rich Savage, his name is. He's a media consultant. We never had him on the show. There's a lot of different reasons, talk as to why he dropped out, whether he didn't have his petitions or just realized the field was a little bit more crowded, or learned that fundraising is a tough chore for a candidate. We'll find out. I heard he was a good guy. Maybe we'll see his name surface again in the future. We have had 2 of the candidates on with us already on shows, and if you haven't seen them, I urge you to go back and look at our archives. We had Jody Wagner, who hails from Virginia Beach, who's running for lieutenant governor, and we had Mike Signer, who's from Arlington actually, who's done a lot of work in Virginia over time, on the show 2 weeks ago. And we will soon have John Bowerbank. He was scheduled to do a show. He had a death in his family, so he'll be back at a later date. We're going to have Pat Edmonson tonight. She's very close by with live television. Sometimes this happens. She's learning a little bit about Northern Virginia's transportation problems. Because she had called us. She was north of Fredericksburg, and I'm sure she was stuck in traffic. If anybody's been on 95 on a Sunday evening, you know what I'm talking about. While we are waiting for her to arrive, I want to take a moment of personal privilege about 2 Democrats who died over the last week. One was a near and dear friend of mine, a near and dear friend of Congressman Jerry Connolly and Congressman Jim Moran. He was Chief of Staff to Supervisor Penny Gross. When he worked on the Hill, he was Chief of Staff to Congressman Merv Dymally of California. He's well known among Democrats here in Northern Virginia and across the state and beyond. And that was our dear friend Marwan Burgan. He died after a long and brutal battle with cancer. And there are a number of people this morning were at one of the Busboys and Poet restaurants in Washington, D.C. For a memorial remembrance of Marwan. He will be buried in Jordan. I think the family will be burying him over there very shortly. And we also lost Sue Bitterman, another longtime Democratic activist here in Northern Virginia. So, without further ado, even though we haven't formally met, she's now on the set. I want to say hello to Pat Edmonson.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you? You learned a little bit about our traffic tonight, huh?
Yes, yes, I did.
Not that you don't have any down in the Hampton Roads area. I've been stuck in your traffic enough as well. Pat Edmonson, I'm going to give a very short intro, and then I'm going to ask you to talk about yourself a little bit. Tell us who you are. I did a little research on you, and I saw that you have attended Elon University. That was a surprise. I didn't realize that. You also have a master's degree out of Princeton. And you live in Virginia Beach. You're married with 1 son. You're a member of the school board in Virginia Beach. You are a 2-term director at large. I don't know if you still are, but you're with the National Hemophilia Association as well.
Mm-hmm.
And now I got a lot of questions for you. We tend to be pretty friendly towards our candidates here. We've had Jody Wagner on. We've had Mike Signer on. We have not had John Bowerbank on yet. I guess we won't have Rich Savage on now. He's dropped out of the race.
Unfortunately.
So there were 5, now there are 4. Welcome aboard. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was born in Atlanta, grew up in New York, am now a permanent resident of Virginia Beach. I grew up in a family that was very active in their community, had a very good example of leadership through service. Everything from being a founding director of Adventures in Learning, which is a public-private partnership that provides an after-school enrichment program for at-risk youth, to being on the board of the National Hemophilia Foundation, to my work today as a school board member. I decided in 2006 to run for election in Virginia Beach, which is the largest city in Virginia. I am honored to serve almost 500,000 residents of Virginia Beach, 74,000 students, budget of $748 million. And I ran as a progressive Democrat, which was very unusual in that year in Virginia Beach.
That's the home of Pat Robertson and Regent University, and although it's been surprising us as Democrats as of late.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I found that people do respond to democratic values and progressive principles. People were able to identify with me. I was able to build a consensus and defeat my opponent, who was an ultra-conservative two-term incumbent.
So how long have you lived in Virginia Beach?
I've been in Virginia Beach about 10 years.
Let's talk about the school board for a minute, because I'm familiar with the school board up here, and it's a springboard for a lot of candidates up here. Sometimes at the local level within Fairfax County, it can be very, very tough because they deal with, obviously running from Virginia Beach School Board, running statewide, you don't have these same issues, but we have found that some of the issues on the school board are so polarizing, and parents are so almost rabid about their side of an issue, their children lie in the balance, et cetera, that it's sometimes very tough for candidates, if they run on the Fairfax County School Board, to then run for higher office, because they have enemies that are not necessarily partisan enemies. They have enemies over some obscure issue that people like me, whose children are now grown out of school, aren't really concerned about, but there are people who do get very concerned about it. I'm sure you've been involved in all those kind of battles. So you're battle tested, huh?
I am. I've been through the fire and come out the other side. I'm very fortunate in Virginia Beach. I've been able to build consensus on those issues that were of particular importance to myself and my constituents. And we have a great school board in Virginia Beach. It's a great cross-section of the population. And I believe that it has prepared me well for statewide office. I'd also like to add that my experience with the Sorensen Institute Political Leaders Program has also prepared me very well for statewide office.
And you graduated in 08?
In 08. I'm a member of the class of 2008.
Yep, for those of I think most of our viewers know what the Sorensen Institute is, but they have several programs. They have a political leadership program. They have a number of different programs. They help teach prospective candidates and the like on how to be candidates, but they also have a heavy emphasis on ethics.
Absolutely.
Every program they do, heavy emphasis on ethics.
That's correct. That's correct. And regardless of which side of the aisle you sit on, we are taught to look at every issue through principled and ethical eyes.
All right, let me start by asking you, why did you choose to run for lieutenant governor? What prompted you to run? I'll ask you about where you stand in a little bit later. We got plenty of time. We got an hour program here. But why did you choose to run? What was the defining moment? What was the turning point? What made you decide to do it?
Well, I've served on the legislative committee of the school board, and what I've come to realize is that under the Dillon rule, school boards, even the size of Virginia Beach, are I hate to, up the ante here, but are held hostage by the Dillon rule. And I realized that my ideas resonated. I also believe that it's time we had a progressive Democratic voice in Richmond. And I felt that I was well prepared to run for the office, and it's being No Child Left Behind is not serving our children well. In fact, I just released my comprehensive education plan the other day. It's up on my website, patforvirginia.com, and I encourage everyone to read it and comment on it, please. I'd like to have your suggestions. But I realized that I wanted a larger sphere of influence for a progressive voice.
This is a bit of an unfair question. It's probably not even true. That's why I'm prefacing it, but I wanted to get it out of the way early. There are some political observers out there. Obviously, Jody Wagner comes from Virginia Beach.
That's correct.
There are some political observers out there who suggest you entered the race as a stalking horse for some other candidate to sort of pull votes out of Virginia Beach. That you know, she's been the perceived front runner, although I don't think the public is really focusing on this race much yet, to tell you the truth. So I'll let you dispel it right here.
Okay, well, if you saw the last poll, Jody is losing points, I'm gaining points. I was second in the poll. There's still a large pool of undecided voters. However, no, I was not paid by anyone to be a stalking horse. In fact, I originally supported Jody, gave her money, but the more I found out about her particular viewpoints, I realized that it was not going to provide the kind of representation that I believe Virginia deserves and needs during these very critical times.
When I was reviewing some stuff you had done, I saw you were on a show a couple of weeks ago with my old pal Fred Hudson. I'm the 11th Congressional District Chair, and he's the 5th Congressional District Chair. He's also the Albemarle County Chair, I believe, as well. A wonderful guy. How'd that interview go? Did he ask you nasty questions like I did? No.
Fred was great, and so far you haven't asked me any nasty questions.
We've got about 2 minutes left, and I want to cover a lot of ground. And I don't want to start a question that's going to where we have to cut it off. I have a habit of doing this. I ask these elaborate questions, and then you don't have a chance to answer them before we go to the break. Let me ask a real simple one. From my perspective, the area of Virginia that most mirrors Northern Virginia is Hampton Roads.
I would agree with that.
Would you agree with that? You folks have the traffic problems. You folks have the growth problems. Obviously, you know, you've got the port. We don't have the port, although we have an inland port. We have Dulles Airport. There are a lot of similarities.
Correct.
We have lots of military veterans. You have more, I think, and you have more active military, but we have quite a bit up here as well because of the Pentagon and the like. Do you see any differences? What are the differences between Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads?
Well, I think that Northern Virginia has been able to develop the IT industry because of your proximity to Washington, D.C. I think that Hampton Roads faces some unique challenges in that we can only really grow in one direction because we have the ocean on the other side.
Yeah.
While we have significant transportation issues, our transportation issues are somewhat different in that we have to cross water in order to get out of Hampton Roads unless we go west.
It's like our bridges going into Washington. It's coming out of Norfolk and coming out of a lot of those communities. I've been stuck on those bridges. I've been stuck in those tunnels.
In fact, the ride up here today was the challenge to find the fastest way to get across one of those crossings.
You hit traffic there, then you hit traffic
right.
there. We're going to be back in 2 minutes, and I ask you to stay with us. Our guest today is Pat Edmonson from Virginia Beach, running for Lieutenant Governor, so please stay. We'll be back.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. Today's guest is Pat Edmonson. She is a Democrat running in the Democratic primary for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. She's in a field of 4. It's anybody's guess what will happen in this race. The public is just starting to realize that there is a race other than the governor's race at this point, which is not surprising. I was involved in the last lieutenant governor's race, both in the primary and in the general election, and it's very hard to get the media's attention, particularly, you know, if there was no primary for the Democrats this time for governor, they'd be focusing on you folks. But with the primary for governor, you've got to fight and scrape just to get in the media.
To get in the conversation, yeah.
I think it'll be an interesting campaign in terms of how each of the candidates gets their message out. Because certainly, particularly with McAuliffe in the race, there's the possibility that he'll draw different people into the primary arena for this election in June. And you folks have to figure out a way to reach them and win them over.
That's right. That's right.
How do you perceive your goals? Let's frame the lieutenant governor's office first. It's to a great degree a ceremonial office. It's almost a part-time office. It doesn't pay a lot. However, it has one important duty, and that is to preside over the Senate, break ties, basically, in the Senate, which when you've got the 21-19 Democratic-Republican breakup here in the Senate, it can be an important vote. I think Bill Bowling has been successful a couple of times on a few issues. And then there's the other important job of lieutenant governor, and that's to run for governor.
Well, down the road we'll see.
What are your goals for this office? How are you going to use it? And I've asked this of each of the candidates. I've gotten different types of responses from each of them. How will you use this office? What do you, I'm not asking right now what you hope to, what success you hope to gain from it, but how will you use it to promote your views, your issues, and the like?
Well, I think it provides a bully pulpit to support legislation that furthers progressive goals in Virginia. Constitutionally, the office of Lieutenant Governor is not limited in terms of what we are able to support and propose. And I see it as much more than a ceremonial position. I intend to be an activist lieutenant governor. If we're fortunate enough to have a Democratic governor, then I will obviously support their goals. If we have a Republican governor, I will provide the loyal opposition.
Interesting, interesting viewpoint, but that, you know, it's the first time I've heard the loyal opposition response. I mean, everybody, of course, talks about it as a bully pulpit, but how will you use that office? How will you promote your views? And we're going to get into, I want to get into some of your views as well. How do you, and I mean, it's an unfair question because obviously you aren't in there yet, you don't see what kind of trappings you have, you don't see the staff you have, etc.
Right.
And I don't think Bill Bowling has been particularly effective in doing much of anything with that office at this point, other than cause a little mischief. How would you propose doing it? Would you travel around the state? Would you form commissions? I mean, what? You
Well, I
haven't
think
thought this out at all?
it would be a combination of things. Forming commissions, obviously, I would travel around the state to promote those issues that are important to me, that are important to Democrats, that we need to build political will for. I would see being an activist lieutenant governor as that is being part of the job, to promote grassroots support for what the legislature is attempting to do. I think for too long we have had basically a obstructionist opposition in the legislature, and it has resulted in nothing, basically. We have no transportation plan. We are unable to move forward on some very important issues in these difficult times. And I see my job as being, a combination of things: building consensus, building political will, encouraging people to contact their representatives, become activists. I actually believe that this government is mine, and that I have a very important part to play, and each of us as citizens has a very important part to play.
Okay. Let's get into the issues a little bit. I'm looking at, now I blew up the print so I could read them without glasses, but I'm looking at 2 full pages with a whole bunch of issues. I was surprised, and a couple of them I'm going to raise with you because I find them very interesting. Without me doing a laundry list of them at this point, what do you think is the most pressing issue facing the Commonwealth right now?
I think it's and I think they're all tied together. Education, the economy, and jobs. And I think that you can't necessarily separate those issues. I think we need to bring industry to Virginia. We should be a vital part of the nation's economy. In order to do that, we have to have a well-prepared workforce. We have to tackle the transportation issue. And I think that those are the issues that are most pressing. I do see education and training as the key to bringing high-paying jobs to Virginia and promoting prosperity and opportunity for all Virginians. However, people have to have a way to get to those jobs. So I don't think that you can necessarily separate them. I think that education and training are the key to the economy, having a prosperous economy in Virginia.
So what do you do about it? How do you promote these things? You've got a House of Delegates, a Republican majority in the House of Delegates that has repeatedly dropped the ball on transportation, has repeatedly refused to provide appropriate and adequate funding for education, has, the role of economic development has historically fallen into the purview of the governor's office. Obviously, it's an executive branch thing, and I think certainly Mark Warner and Tim Kaine have worked very hard to bring new industry and business into Virginia. Certainly, and I don't want to suggest anybody is thriving at this point, because everyone's getting hit by this recession that in my mind borders on a depression. But we've been fairly resilient up here in Northern Virginia because of the high tech. Right. My understanding is we have now exceeded Silicon Valley in terms of the concentration of high tech industry in that Dulles corridor. And obviously it's very important not only to Northern Virginia's economy, but to the economy of the whole state. Some suggest what we need to do is start building, getting the high-tech industry to move down that entire I-81 spine and get down into Southwest and areas like that where they could certainly use jobs like that, and many of those jobs could be done there just as easily as they're done here.
Absolutely.
How do we do that?
Well, we have to have a way for people to get to those jobs. We have to provide incentives for industry to relocate to that part of the state. Why would an industry locate to a part of the state where their workers can't get to those jobs? Why would anyone relocate to a part of the state where they will not have a steady supply of well-qualified workers? So I see it as providing a well-prepared workforce, stable workforce, well-educated workforce, and providing transportation so that people from the southern part of the state can go there. And as you know, we have significant problems with the economy in the southern part of the state. And I see building up industry, whatever that industry may be, probably high-tech, but as you're aware, moving into the second decade of the 21st century, we're not really sure what the jobs of the future are going to look like, and that is not my quote. That comes from Tony Wagner, who wrote The Global Achievement Gap. So we need to educate our young people for jobs that we don't really know what are there. However, critical thinking, problem solving, all of those 21st century skills will prepare our young people very well for the industries of the future. They will become the entrepreneurs. But we also have to provide incentives for existing companies to locate to Virginia.
Despite what some folks on South Side and Southwest think, we in Northern Virginia do have worry and have concerns about the welfare of that part of the state. The difference in per capita income and median income between those two areas is extraordinary.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, we are in Northern Virginia feels that they're not getting their fair share. And now money's tight, so, I mean, they have to feel the same way in Southwest as well. You've been down there a number of times, I imagine. I'm sure you're putting lots of miles on your automobile. What are you hearing down there? Because that is, for many in Northern Virginia, it's amazing how many people from up here have never been there. Right. They have no idea, because it's further away than New York City. It's far further than going to New York.
Right. Well, we have a very diverse state, so it's, and a large state, so it's understandable that people in Northern Virginia might not necessarily know what's going on in Giles County or Louisa or the Valley. What I hear are people who are worried about the economy, worried about holding on to the jobs that they do have, seeing themselves sink further and further into an economic abyss. I think that we are all Virginians. And
hold that thought. We're going to be taking another break. It's the pitfalls of television. Again, my guest is Pat Edmonson. Hang with us. We'll be back in 2 minutes for another segment.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo.
I would like to speak English better.
Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
El Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals,
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
are a small part of what we do.
Son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia.
Comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
Ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. Again, my guest today is Pat Edmonson from Virginia Beach. She is a Democrat, one of 4 running for lieutenant governor in the June primary. People need to pay attention to these candidates in this race. In the past, it's, Governor Kane was lieutenant governor before he became governor. It's an important seat. Most of us don't focus on it, and sometimes I worry that the voters won't, the primary voters won't focus on it until the final days leading up to the election. These candidates are working very hard, and today it's Pat's day to tell you and the voters of Virginia where she stands on some of the issues. I was going to ask you about the Dillon rule. You'd be surprised sometimes. I have a candidate or a politician in here, and they don't fully understand what it is. You obviously do. I'm sure it was a topic at Sorensen.
Absolutely.
It's in fact often they ask the question of applicants when they apply to go and they do the interviews.
It's what my application was about.
Really? Talk to me a little bit about, certainly you have objections to it, as many folks in local government do. Crystallize those objections.
Well, I think that when the Dillon rule, crudely stated, basically says that localities are not bright enough to make decisions for themselves. So based on a formula, Richmond hands our city council money. Our city council, that is made up largely of developers and real estate brokers, hands us the money and tells us how to spend it on the school board. I would say that those people are not really qualified to identify those critical needs that we on the school board are more familiar with, and could in fact make better decisions about how we spend our money. We don't need to have our hands held by the city council, which is another elected body. I also would disagree with the notion that one elected body needs to go to another one on bended knee and ask for money. I think there's something inherently anti-democratic about that.
Of course, the city council has to live and die on the taxes they raise, and the legislature has to live and die on the taxes that they raise or reduce, and the Congress has to live and die on the revenue that they raise and pass on. So there's some of that. Just so our viewers fully understand the Dillon rule, what it in essence says, and I think you put it very well, Pat, what it in essence says is that the legislature dictates most of the rules. There are certain changes in law that you would think a local government could make that they can't.
Exactly.
And certainly up here, particularly larger governments, bristle at the Dillon rule. Let's get on to some issues. And I know I have some in my pile here. We talked a little bit about the economy. We talked about education. Let's talk about energy and the environment. It's been a big issue here in Virginia because of the prospect of potential offshore drilling for oil and gas. Let's start right there. Well, obviously you live at the beach, near the beach.
That's correct. I am opposed to offshore drilling. I think that searching for more fossil fuel is exercise in futility. There's a finite amount of fossil fuel. We have reached a point where we have to invest in alternative energy forms. And I think that Virginia is uniquely positioned to grow an economy around developing those alternative energy sources. I believe that we have reached a point where I think that the constant search for fossil fuel has enabled terrorism, and I would encourage every Virginian to support the development of alternative energy sources, and offshore drilling to me is not an alternative.
Let's go right to the alternatives. What do you think are the most viable alternative energy sources in Virginia?
wind, solar, nuclear. I believe that clean coal is an oxymoron. I don't think that you can have clean coal. And in the interim, natural gas. Now, I am cognizant of people's jobs that would be affected. So it's a delicate balance to develop alternative energy sources, prepare people to move into those jobs, retraining perhaps, and create revenue for our state. And there's no reason why Virginians cannot be at the forefront of that movement while being ever diligent about our beautiful environment.
Obviously there are folks in Southwest who are, their livelihoods and their parents' livelihoods and their grandparents' livelihoods were tied to coal. That's what they know, that's what they do. Sometimes I'll talk to environmentalists from Arlington or somewhere, and they're of the mind that, well, we just stopped using it. And I said, well, how are those people going to make a living? Well, whether it's a good living or whatever, how are those people going to make a living? And that's when they draw a blank.
Right, right.
It's an economic issue as much as it's an energy issue, and you're right. We have to find something to replace those jobs with jobs that are comparable. They've always been some of the best paying jobs in that area, in an area that doesn't have many high paying jobs. It was interesting to hear you say nuclear. I can remember 30, 35 years ago where nuclear was viewed as, the environmentalists wouldn't even want to talk to you about it. But now you hear progressives and environmentalists talk much more about nuclear. Certainly there's been more safeguards. The big issue, I guess, is what to do with the spent fuel.
Well, I understand that France recycles their nuclear waste. I think that's something that we can't dismiss an idea just because someone else came up with it first. I think we have to look at best practices globally. We've had nuclear submarines for over 50 years without incident. I think that I probably wouldn't have recommended nuclear energy with the past administration, only because I'm not sure that the regulations would have been in place. But I do think that it's a viable energy form and something that we should certainly take advantage of.
Now let's talk a little bit more about wind. There's certainly, even now as you come out of West Virginia, on the West Virginia side, you see some of these huge turbine propeller things they have up there, the windmills, yeah. I'm not sure I like them. I've heard a few, not there, but elsewhere around the country. Palm Springs has hundreds of them in the desert, and you can actually hear them whirring, and they draw a lot of power from them. Are they viable? Do we put them off the coast, sticking out of the ocean? Where do we put them?
Well, I think that obviously at the beach we have a constant wind force. I think anything that's off the coast of Virginia, we have to work very closely with the Navy to make sure that we don't get in their way, particularly in Hampton Roads with so much maritime traffic in and out.
Largest deep water port on the East Coast.
Exactly, exactly. However, I think we'd be foolish not to take advantage of that resource that we're all getting blown in the face with all the time. Some people may consider them an eyesore. I don't. To me, it seems almost part of the landscape, and I know that there's been some controversy in Palm Springs over the people who want the wind turbines or windmills and those who don't. I think that we would be foolish not to develop that energy resource in Virginia.
I guess it certainly beats an oil derrick, huh?
I don't want one in my backyard.
Offshore oil platform? I've stepped in enough globs of oil on California and Texas beaches.
And that's exactly my point. I love the people that say that there will not be any coastal effect to offshore drilling. I beg to differ.
Let's, I'm going to move right down this list, if I may.
Sure.
And I don't want to ignore civil rights, but I will get to that. Gun ownership. Guns are always a tough issue in Virginia.
Right.
You talk to officials up here, and they tend to want to put a lot of strictures on gun ownership and on guns. It's relatively urban up here. It's close to Washington, D.C. But you talk to people in many other parts of the state, and it's a total different attitude about guns. And I'm not saying there's any unity up here, but the overwhelming majority. Jim Webb campaigned as absolutely support of legitimate gun owner rights. Mark Warner was somewhere in that mix. I don't think it was a major issue in his race for the Senate. Where do you stand?
Well, I'm not opposed.
Statewide, it's a tough issue.
I understand, and I understand, having traveled around the state, that certainly people use guns for sport protection, target shooting, whatever. I'm not opposed to gun ownership. I think that if a person is going to own a gun, they should be trained in the safe use of a gun, safe storage of a gun. If you have children in your home, those children should also learn safe use of a gun, safe storage of a gun. Where I guess I disagree is some of the very radical methods that the NRA has used to promote gun ownership. I don't think, you really need an automatic weapon to go deer hunting. But my understanding is that it's still supposed to be a sport and, not a massacre. However, I really don't have a problem with people owning guns, but I would encourage regulation of those guns in terms of safety, in terms of understanding what a gun is used for. A gun is really only used for one purpose, and that's to kill someone or something. But people do enjoy shooting at targets, and I would encourage people who want to own a gun to educate themselves. And in fact, I would encourage the state to require people take a course in the safe use and storage of those firearms.
We have a question from Mike in Centerville. I don't know if this guy's putting you to the test or not. The question is, do the standards of learning tests promote critical thinking? So they're obviously watching the show because they heard you talk about critical thinking.
Right. No, I don't think they do necessarily, and I don't want to give the impression that I'm anti-assessment. I think we always have to measure where our students are so we know how to make adjustments to their education. But I think there's great danger in teaching to the test. Memorization is the lowest form of learning. We're preparing a generation of young people, frankly, for minimum wage jobs, and I just don't think that's going to cut it in what is rapidly becoming the second decade of the 21st century. So no, Mike from Centerville, I don't think that the SOLs promote critical thinking, but thank you so much for asking the question.
It was interesting. I had lunch today with 4 people. 3 of the 4 were teachers. 1 was retired, 2 were still on the job. And they were just beaten up on No Child Left Behind and on all this teaching to the test. And their argument was the same, that kids aren't learning anything. They're learning by rote, and they're not capable to do, they won't be trained to be capable to do the jobs that require you to think out of the box sometimes. We're running out of time in this segment. Time flies when you have fun. We have one more segment after this. I want everybody to stay with us. We have a few more issues we want to deal with here. Again, my guest is Pat Edmonson. She is the Democratic candidate, one of 4 for Lieutenant Governor. The primary is in June. We'll be holding a primary for Governor and Lieutenant Governor. At this point, it looks like there's only one Democrat running for the Attorney General slot. So stick with us. We're going to give her an opportunity to talk directly to you in this next segment.
This year, 28,000 Americans will be diagnosed with oral cancer. Every year, 7,000 Americans die of oral cancer.
I'm Eva Cohen, and I'm an oral cancer survivor. I didn't fit the profile. I didn't smoke or drink. I had no family history of cancer, no family history of cancer. I was 31 years old. I went to see my dentist about a sore in my mouth that wouldn't heal. It was oral cancer. I had to have a radical neck dissection and a portion of my tongue reconstructed. I didn't know if I was going to live or die.
I'm Surgeon General Richard Carmona. The survival rate for oral cancer is only 50%. Oral cancer can happen to anyone. If you have a sore or lesion in your mouth that doesn't heal within 2 weeks, see your dentist. Early detection is the key.
Early detection saves lives. I know.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty. But one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
2 words for you. Pop quiz. Ready? Name any funny movie. A drama. Name a mystery. And one more thing. Name the movie your kids saw today in science class.
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school. And know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more, do more.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. My guest today is Pat Edmonson, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Pat, I'm going to run through some of these issues quick because I want to give you a couple of minutes to talk directly to the voters. We had a little chat off camera, and I was impressed by what you had to say, and I thought let you tell them directly. Healthcare. What do we do about healthcare? We have, I don't know, certainly hundreds of thousands, if not more, people who lack health care in Virginia. We still have kids. S-CHIP increased the number of children covered, which passed Congress in its first days this year, and certainly all the Democrats in Congress from Virginia, Connolly, Scott, Boucher, Nye, Perriello, and Moran all voted for it. They're using tobacco money to fund the increase. I'm sure there were a few eyebrows raised by some of the folks. You know, we still are a tobacco state, but that's the way it is. What can we do to bring health care to more Virginians?
Well, I think that we have to have the political will to say that any Virginian who requires health care should get it. We need to perhaps provide tax credits to physicians who choose to practice in rural areas. Take health care where we need it the most. I was very pleased that our esteemed representatives chose to support S-CHIP. But I think that we can still do better for Virginians. And in fact, for the country, I find it unacceptable that a 12-year-old boy who had a toothache eventually succumbed to that toothache because his mother could not find a Medicaid dentist. That is unacceptable, I think, to every Virginian and certainly to every American. I think that we need to sit down together in a nonpartisan way and figure out how we can manage to get everyone adequate health care. I think we have to focus on wellness and prevention.
Immigration. Certainly it's a federal responsibility. The federal government has failed in that responsibility over the years. There are some, like the Corey Stewarts of the world from Prince William County, who want to round them up, throw them in a concentration camp, and ship them off in freight trains. There are others who take a more moderate approach and say if they break the law, then they come into the system and they are, you know, moved back to their home. Where are you on immigration? How do you deal with it? You know, the state clearly doesn't have the money to do anything, any of that stuff right now. Should states assume more responsibility, or how should we deal with it?
Well, I think that we have laws on the books that should be enforced. I think that if a person has lived here for 20 years and raised a family here and contributed to society in Virginia, that we should not break up their family. We should provide a path to citizenship. However, I would like to say that I would be wholeheartedly in favor of holding corporations that lure undocumented workers into this country responsible for that. There is an example of one company that actually posts help wanted signs in Mexico that read to the effect, if you can get here, we have a job for you. Those people should be held responsible for that. That's totally irresponsible. We're setting people up for being held in jail indefinitely until we can manage to get them back to their country of origin, and we're providing false hope. I would like to add, however, that every economic boom in this country has been preceded by a wave of immigration.
We were all immigrants at one point, unless we're American Indian descent, I guess.
Only a little bit, but yes, that's true. We all got here somehow.
Yeah. I want to ask you about civil rights. You'd spoken to me a little bit about it when we were off camera, and I saw you had it listed as one of your issues. I'd like to say it was listed first, but I realize the issues are listed alphabetically. So.
Not necessarily in order of importance. Civil rights is very important, and I think that we have seen certainly that we have some way to go in this country in terms of civil rights. I, for instance, consider universal health care a civil right. I consider education a civil right. I have to wonder why women are not protected under the law. What happened to the Equal Rights Amendment? Why is Virginia not among the states that ratified the Equal Rights Amendment? As I told you earlier, I believe in the inherent worth of all people. All people have something to contribute. Civil rights is not a thing of the past. It is a thing that we live with today, we will live with in the future. And it is so much a part of the fabric of our society that we can't ever allow ourselves to slide backwards. We have to keep looking forward and provide opportunities for every Virginian, regardless of whether they're white or black, Hispanic, Asian, rich, poor, gay, or straight.
You may not hear this question during the primary, but you will hear it in a general election. I saw it come up in the last lieutenant governor's general by the Republicans. And you will be asked, as a Democratic nominee, if you end up being the Democratic nominee, where do you stand on right to work? Of course, Virginia is one of the right-to-work states, and it's one of two states that actually have stricter anti-labor laws than most of the other states in the country.
Well, I have to say that right to work, I think everyone should have the right to work, let's put it that way. However, I think that when what you have to negotiate with is your labor, you should have the right to collectively bargain. I think that when we look back at our history, certainly unions helped create a vibrant middle class in this country. It provides safeguards for workers. The reason that we have a 40-hour work week for people who are lucky enough to only work 40 hours a week nowadays is because of unions. A lot of the reason that we don't have 8-year-olds working in factories is because of unions. So I would have to say that right to work puts the people at a disadvantage and gives corporations an unfair advantage over the individual.
One more quick question, then I want to give you some camera time directly with the viewers. How's the campaign going? Are you raising some money? Are you know, how many miles you put on your car? Just give me a 30-second chapter and verse on you.
I put a lot of miles on my car. The fundraising is going terrifically. I think the only person who has outraised me total has been Jody Wagner. However, I think on a weekly basis I'm now raising more money than she is. The last poll showed me in second place. So my campaign is getting some traction. I think people are responsive to my ideas. People are ready to move forward, to not settle for an unresponsive legislature. They're ready for a progressive voice. People realize that the presidential election in November was not the end, it was just the beginning. And that we have a real opportunity here to become the country, to become the state that we can be and we should be.
I'm going to give you 2 minutes to talk to the viewers directly and tell them why they should elect you. 2 minutes. It's your time. You can say whatever you want, and it's directly to them, not to me.
Good evening. I'm Pat Edmonson, and I'm running to be your next Lieutenant Governor. I have a couple of questions to ask you. Do you believe that we should spend more money educating children than incarcerating them? Do you believe in the inherent worth of all people, whether they're rich or poor, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, gay, or straight? If you believe that Richmond is broken and we need a progressive Democrat in the Lieutenant Governor seat, then please vote for me in June. I will provide that progressive voice for all Virginians.
Nice and succinct. And what's your website?
www.patforvirginia.com. I would encourage you all to visit, comment. I have recently released my comprehensive education plan. In the next day or so, I will be releasing a comprehensive economic plan. Please comment. I'm interested in what you think and any suggestions you may have.
Down at the Jefferson Jackson dinner in Richmond, which was in February, right? January, February, whenever, earlier this year.
It was sometime, it was cold.
It was cold, that's true. I was with Jerry Connolly, and we saw you at one point. You folks, all the candidates had booths and tables and stuff, and we saw you earlier in the evening, but you were conspicuously absent from the dinner.
Right. Well,
where were you?
I chose to spend my time at the Jefferson Jackson dinner visiting a homeless shelter just about a block and a half from the convention center, run by Home Again. And at my table, my guests were the executive director of Home Again, a veteran who has experienced homelessness, who is now in transition housing, and several other residents of the homeless shelter. I think it's important that we recognize people become homeless for many different reasons. And I wanted to give those people the opportunity to participate in democracy, to hear their candidates, and have the experience of being at the JJ dinner. And also the visit to the homeless shelter was a very profound experience for me.
Okay, we're running out of time. Pat, I want to thank you for being on the show today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope our 3 viewers paid some attention. And I'll tell you, I didn't suggest this to the other candidates, but I'll suggest it here. Maybe we'll end up doing a debate between the 4 Democratic candidates. Again, this was Pat Edmonson, Democratic guy.